Hey, it's me! When it comes to role-playing games, the easiest way to fulfill a role is to create one for yourself. A blank slate in a world that's ready to be painted in the blood, spit, and piss of your enemies. Kind of like what I just did back there after somersaulting for 6 miles. Getting absolutely sucked into an immersive world with story beats that are for the most part up to your own interpretation, or ones that you completely craft for yourself. Every once in a bottle of Blue Moon do we see a piece of media that's so innovative to the point of overnight paragon, and we all get to collectively experience it, making for a beautiful occasion. And let me tell you, Elden Ring has earned the right to don the Paragon party hat. I don't mean to brag or nothing, but I've played a lot of open world games, and they mostly seem to suffer from a plague that I'll go ahead and call the big spoon. Interrupting your playtime, halting your experience to remind you it's a video game. It's like a big brother just looming over you and calling you. And it's got little arms, and it's constantly pushing you in the right direction like a toddler just dented your soft spot on the dining room table. And the spoon part is because it's constantly spoon feeding you information. That's why I call it that. But honestly, games have been this way for a while because it's safe, proven to be successful, and doesn't leave a whole lot of room for involuntary celibate agoraphobes to leave literally unplayable on your game's Steam page. However, this typically leaves your finished product feeling cookie cutter, and the seams that you work so hard to sew to ensure a tight-knit experience end up just suffocating the player. And you could forget about any sort of long-lasting effect that it may have on them because the choices they made weren't even theirs to begin with. And Elden Ring takes this concept and does the exact opposite, almost to a fault, depending on how full your diaper is. I've spent over 110 hours enveloped in the lands between, just soaking in the ebb and flow, and I was left feeling something that I haven't felt in a very long time. But what is it? What does Elden Ring do that's so goddamn good that it could potentially change the way we interact with this medium forever? Well, for starters,
offer you an accord, but you, I am afraid, are maidenless.
not many developers put absolute faith in their player. Typically when you boot up an action-adventure title, it feels more like the Simpsons 4D ride at Universal Studios than an actual $60 experience. It's like an Uber ride. You'll get to your destination, but Harash is gonna drive you there. Mind if I, just stand? Yeah, thanks. In Elden Ring, the story is fully yours. From the moment you put your disgusting little fingers on your controller all the way up until the credits roll, you can ensure that everything you did was not dictated by someone else. From Software has never pushed their story onto the players, but rather allowed you to figure it out for yourself in sort of a murder mystery-like fashion. Elden Ring seeks to do the same exact thing here, but even more so, with the most jarring narrative delivery I've ever seen in a video game.
Saika, you dead? Yeah, man.
The events of its story take place before you even get there. You're just a third party with no real stake in anything, and you're just taking in the experiences around you and doing it all for free, like an unpaid intern for Jesus Christ. Of course, this is not anything new in FromSoft's running list of entries, but it's how it's implemented here that really makes it shine. I know that this comparison has been said a lot, but it is a lot like Breath of the Wild with its approach to the endgame. How you get from point A to point 3 is completely up to you. My friends and I were sharing our stories, and even after countless hours of exploring every Tom Nook and crannies named Cran to give my Samurai guy the best possible adventure, I still managed to miss some stuff. It's the perfect DIY RPG, honestly. A lot of Elden Ring's nuances are discovered in the opening hours of the game. Upon making it to the overworld for the first time, you're greeted with a couple things. The character you can talk to gives you a vague idea of where you want to go and insults your love life in the process.
You ain't got no bitches!
Who don't got no bitch?
The sprawling horizon of the first area, a big fucking tree, some other areas in the distance clouded by, well, clouds, and a huge enemy to your right. And you have a sword in your hand, and if you got chimpanzee brain like I do, then your first instinct is probably to run over there and try to smack him with it. But lo and behold, he just steamrolled you. This is the game's first lesson. You fucking suck, you think at 140p, you're sick in the head, did you really think you could beat him with a wooden stick and a pickle jar lid? That's not what a nice story would probably be like, you can't take an enemy on unless you know you can take him on.
Jesus Christ.
I like this a lot because I took that lesson and applied it throughout the entirety of my playthrough, and it felt like actual meaningful game design. Like, it felt like the game was actually speaking to me without even fucking saying anything. Your story has officially started at this point, and these first few hours are absolutely crucial to setting the stage in perfect non-linear game design. The golden ejaculate emanating from the point of grace is actively telling you where to go, so you follow it, only to be confronted by the towering crenellations of Stormvale Castle, a massive area filled with enemies who will shove your shit in the first chance they get. Now, our gamer brains have been conditioned to think that this path we just followed is the correct one, but you really feel the underpreparedness upon arrival. This leaves you feeling defeated and weak, and this is when I turned the game off for the first time, thinking I understood exactly what I was getting into. An open world game with that logo on the front that tells me I will never touch this again because of my terrible hand-eye coordination. It wasn't until the next day where I attempted my second run, this time fully foregoing the golden ejaculate and making my own path, due south to a beach where I spit in the face of every animal rights activist and went full Michael Vick on every small animal I could find. And that's when it became crystal clear. The world is my microwave bagel, and I'm gonna fuck it. At the 2022 Taipei Game Show, Yasuhiro Kitao, From Software's producers, said the game would take you roughly 30 hours if you took the main route to finish the game, humbly adding that there's potential for dozens more added hours. In starting the game for the first time, that makes sense, but as you venture further into the game, you realize that it's a hell of a lot bigger than they initially let on. It seems like game developers typically boast about their massive playtimes, practically writing out an itinerary for you in countless gameplay presentations, completely eradicating the element of surprise come launch day, combining every stupid little second it would take to find all the Zimbabwe pieces and hidden packages. But From Software went with the lower end, which surprised a lot of players, myself included. And the art of surprise is something that is extremely abundant in Elden Ring. From its various landscapes to maze-like legacy dungeons, it can all feel like a lot, but having that 30-hour promise in the back of your mind, you're constantly upset about it ending soon. But then you enter a new area and the map turns into fucking North Dakota. This all makes for a fantastic user experience. I mean, I feel like fucking Christopher Columbus discovering new land, without all the bad stuff. More of the bad stuff, depending on how you look at it. And speaking of user experience, following the game's successful launch, it seemingly overshadowed a lot of other titles that were coming out around the same time. So some sour-ass developers from some other studios decided to take some jabs at Elden Ring online for all to see, specifically calling out its user experience, which, last I checked, you guys are the biggest offenders of the big spoon that I mentioned earlier. Constantly giving off exposition and talking to yourself like a schizophrenic with a Bluetooth earpiece and guiding the player where to go, like, maybe I should go check out Booger Cave before I progress the story, and I'll go to Booger Cave. Thank you. It's a lot like playing a platformer in the 90s where they tell you to press the circle button in your mind to attack. But Elden Ring's user experience is everything I didn't even know I was missing. There's no human psychology happening to make sure you're following the path that was intended for you. No expert on Homo sapien tendencies to ensure the game will be played like a rat's maze. If you hit a wall, you find your way around that wall. Or alternatively, utilize the game's mechanics to tear that fucking wall down. And that's great. I love that. Tesla, it's got autopilot. In my fighting games video, I talked a little bit about how in grade school I was told you could unlock Goku in Super Smash Bros. By doing some arduous task, and it turned out that was a fucking lie. But then when Melee came out, I was told you could unlock Mewtwo by starting a 2-player match and just leaving your GameCube on overnight. And that fucking worked, and it blew my stupid ass little mind. The art of word-of-mouth walkthroughs is truly a beautiful thing, because my stupid Tarnish didn't open his mouth and say, hey, we should go to this church at this time and meet this witch and then we'll go check out Booger Cave. Instead, a few good boys from the Beef Boys server blessed me with this information, and seeing it actually happen blew my stupid ass mind wide open all over again. It honestly felt like unlocking Mewtwo all those years ago. It's crazy that such a small thing can make you realize how much you missed not having your handheld in such a special medium. Unless you consider getting your ass saved by a Mimic Tier hand-holding, then yeah, my hand was nice and toasty. Throughout From Software's many trips to the labor room to deliver a beautiful baby sadomasochist, they've developed a pretty diehard community of people who love to piece their narratives together through community-made lore videos, dedicated wikis, having to read consumables and items you pick up, or remember a specific instance where somebody was somewhere and mentioned something in passing. It's like piecing together a huge jigsaw puzzle that only ends up barely making sense by the end of it. And honestly, it's great. Of course, the same can be said here in Elden Ring, but I won't be going too much into story detail just because there's tons of videos already doing that, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. But with that said, I am getting into spoiler territory, so skip to this timestamp if you haven't already finished this, because I really want you to experience this firsthand. Okay, is it cool if I... Just, yeah, okay, thanks. So I mostly want to talk about 3 heavy fucking hitters that perfectly encapsulate what I'm talking about here. Roger the Sorcerer, Master Hugh, and the Round Table. Roger is one of the first NPCs you meet. The world is big and can be scary at times, and that's due in part to everything wanting to turn your digestive system inside out. Approaching the first boss battle with Margit and being so underleveled and new to the game, I got my ass handed to me quite a bit. So you summon this mystery dude to help you out, and it's Roger. Later on, you meet him, but the real him, and he seems like a nice dude, offering to teach you his tricks. There isn't much backstory given to you about this dude, but he's your buddy at this point, and you guys went testicle to testicle in battle. So that's enough for me. As you make your way through Stormvale, you find this bloodstain next to this giant squid, and it's clearly Roger being spit roasted. But by what? When you return to the Round Table, he's paralyzed from the waist down, and this sort of environmental storytelling truly caught me off guard on my first playthrough, because seeing these things play out are completely optional, but can branch out into wider side quests granted you do things in a certain order. This really plays into what I said earlier about it being the perfect DIY RPG, because I didn't do any of this on my first playthrough because I didn't even know it was an option, so in my playthrough he just died of natural causes. Another NPC that you'll probably spend the most time with is Master Hugh, an imprisoned blacksmith who you will constantly pay a visit to in your travels, considering he's your go-to for strengthening your weapons. You get a pretty good idea of his backstory through exhausting his dialogue, so you feel for the dude, and this will play into my next example. The Round Table. A hub world, a safe space, a place for you to wind down and get your final will and testament in order and, go watch The Price is Right in the back room with Fia. For most of the game, it's a calm and soothing environment, a break from the dangerous world of the lands between. It isn't until you begin to progress the story that you see changes happening, like some of the people leaving on their own journeys, or the lights shutting off and one of the inhabitants attacking you out of nowhere, or the consequences of your actions in burning the Erd Tree directly impacting the Round Table by setting it ablaze. And that's when you start to notice Master Hugh experiencing symptoms of dementia, even forgetting who you are shortly after having a heart-to-heart that he's always had faith in you, and his one goal in life was to create a weapon strong enough to slay a god, and then he refuses to leave the Round Table as it crumbles around him because he's fulfilling his life's purpose. All of this goes down without a single cutscene, not even a modicum of misplaced exposition, okay? And it still managed to have a bigger impact on me than most games that are perfectly tailored with realistic facial animations and 16:9 widescreen to perfectly convey human emotion. People in this game don't even move their mouths. Their mouths flap up and down. It's like having an NPC from GTA San Andreas bring me to tears. There's a ton of more examples of this, but I really just wanted to highlight these as my personal favorites because, man, rolling through the Round Table during late game segments was such a bittersweet experience, seeing your safe zone slowly go to shit after spending what feels like a lifetime calling it home. So if I may, I'd like to go back to the Big Spoon topic because From Software has created a system that is so perfect for aiding players without even directly aiding them, but instead letting players aid other players in beautiful harmony. Throughout the Soulsborne series, FromSoft implemented a feature where you can see the ghosts of other players, sort of like in racing games how you race a ghost to beat their time. And there's also these bloodstains where you can see just how some idiot got turned into Nutella on the concrete. And of course, the many messages scattered throughout the world. This allows players to offer guidance, troll, or to relentlessly solicit their finger fetishes to people who may be lost on where to go. This almost creates an illusion of company so you don't feel so alone in such a big world. It's a truly beautiful way to work together without even knowing it. It's like Miyazaki was like, just let them figure it out. And it fucking worked. And there's also PvP mode, which is like getting glass in your eye. I know a big reason that developers spend so much time making sure their game is as user-friendly as possible is because you don't want a big drop-off 20% into your game because some dipshit player couldn't figure out how to beat the coagulated piss monster. But a difficult game with tools available that make it more forgiving to those who want to seek it out? Now that's pretty fucking great. That's a good compromise, I think. And speaking of coagulated piss monsters, the complaints that I usually see swimming around in the sea of perfect scores for Elden Ring is the copy-pasted dungeons, enemies, and bosses. And while that's true, it's what's in between that makes it make sense. And to accurately explain that, I invited my coagulated piss monster James Miller to wax poetic at those who might not want to look past that and see that everything in this world has meaning. Take it away.
Soulsborne games are notoriously hard and tend to interface with players in the same way a femdom goddess might interface with her gimps, a sort of pain for pleasure system. While a gimp may risk the health and safety of his nutsack for a chance to peer upon the outer rim of Goddess Vanessa 442's areolas for just a second, in the same way Elden Ring players constantly risk the health and well-being of their controllers for a chance to move on and gaze upon another gorgeous, locale, or otherworldly set piece. But despite all your rage, you're still just a gamer in a cage being constantly nudged forward into this masochistic feedback loop of shock and awe that for some reason your little tight gamer ass can't help but lust after. But for some with a more narrow view of things, that grueling punishment can kind of act as a deterrent, or impose a sort of soft lock on what would otherwise be an unprecedented gaming experience. But that's kind of the point. Like my goddess always says, if you can't stand the strap on, get out of the latex. If for some reason you found yourself on a game forum still optimized for a Commodore 64 running on dial-up, the most common critiques of Elden Ring that you'd see are a lack of balancing between areas, poor optimization for PC on launch, copy and pasted boss encounters and dungeons, my nuts. And like the fact that Miyazaki didn't code the women in the game, or anybody honestly, to like be able to interact with like my full body haptic feedback suit and stuff. However, most of these problems have a solution to them, except for the PC optimization thing. But all the other ones have a solution. People don't like to hear the term get good, usually because it's not said with a bunch of tact, and it's not really advice most of the time. It's an insult. But here and now, hear me now, I'm telling you get good, you fucking bitch, as genuine advice to other anger-prone apes like myself. Yes, you can learn when Alopecia the Grafted is gonna use his Gluck Gluck surprise attack that has an AoE the size of New Jersey. I believe in you. And when you do, you will have gotten good. And Elden Ring offers an assortment of ways to show the bald baby who's boss baby. Summons, mimics, sorcery, rune farming, respecs, mounted combat, ashes of war, a Trader Joe's produce section of consumables, cooperative play, and a graveyard of advice and examples of what not to do from players who trailblaze the path that you walk upon at this very moment. You name it, it's there to help. And I know this might be overwhelming or just a burden for the casual Calvin that wants to kill time on his day off. But this game makes you earn the right to be a casual Calvin, and every player gets there at some point. And when you really get to dig your teeth into the game, I promise you'll get up from your couch on that Saturday, not feeling like you successfully killed time, but you did something worthwhile. As for the copy and pasted dungeons and bosses, there's almost always a lore or story reason for bosses to be where they are. Good example of what I mean that you'll probably encounter is at the foot of Mount Gelmer when you're heading for the Volcano Manor. You come across these Iron Virgins and Little Night Boys battling. Both of these factions of enemies are common throughout the lands between, but the reason they're here, surrounded by death and decay and fucking fighting each other, is because they're the remnants of a huge war that happened prior to the events of the game and your story. Therefore, these repeat enemies were placed here with purpose to tell a story that wouldn't be possible without them. Elden Ring absolutely oozes variety in every ounce of its DNA. From the green plains of Limgrave to the cool mountains of the Giants to the dire docks of Lithuania. The game never ceases to really make you feel the exaggerated swagger of a tarnished troglodyte. After playing through Elden Ring, it's impossible not to notice the incredible attention to detail and just the sheer number of experiences ready to be had at your discretion. Similarities between dungeons, repeat mobs, recurring bosses, to me, they all feel like inhabitants of a world with structure and purpose and history. And in the most natural way possible. It's like going to the Philippines and questioning why there's a bunch of Filipinos everywhere. Anyway, I think I'm done. It was fun, just like the podcast we do together that people should probably watch or something. All right, well, here's my butthole.
As mentioned before, the amount of attention to detail put into Elden Ring is quite impressive. Back when Red Dead Redemption 2 came out, it was horseballs this and horseballs that, but in Elden Ring, the horseballs for me was every living creature that has it out for you. Developers have always looked at what is the current trend in the market. What are people most excited for? Is it online hero shooters? Could it be Will Smith holding a gun? Is it grindy online components that overshadow its single-player counterpart with predatory microtransactions and no dedicated servers? I think the answer is all of the above. I guess what I'm trying to say is From Software did something new. They had faith in their player base to not hold their hand at every turn. Faith to not constantly wear their budget on their sleeve. Faith in the player to carve out their own paths and make sure they can make it from point A to point Z without any sort of hiccups. Faith to give you room to breathe and never ever correct you on which way to go. They had faith in the people who enjoy the art direction and faith that it'll be massively successful to the point where we see the little embers slowly stoke the flames of a long stagnant genre. As you can probably tell, faith is the key word, so if you got a moment, I'd like to speak to you about our Lord and Savior. I don't know how to end this video. Thanks for watching.